What's up, everybody? I hope y'all are having a wonderful day. I'm Anthony. On today's video, I got a really good one for y'all. If you like to grow your own food or you have any aspirations of ever growing your own food, you might want to pay attention because today's video is going to be a very, very good one for you. Today, we're going to be talking all about manure, how it can help you, and why you need to use it. So stay tuned. That's right, today we're going to be talking about manure, but I'm going to be talking about it in the context of helping you grow food, all right? Basically, what I'm saying is there's a lot of people out there who may be on social media, Instagram, Facebook, that kind of thing, TikTok, and they're showing everybody these really nice looking gardens, but they're not telling people how they got it, all right? And the unfortunate secret is there's a lot of people out there who use chemical fertilizers that like to present like they are organic or doing things the right way, but in reality, they just got really lucky because it's their first year garden. The soil they planted on was already pretty fertile, and they used a chemical bagged dirt on top of it. So yeah, of course, that first year it's gonna look really, really good. The secret to finding out if someone actually knows what they're talking about is going back to that same garden 3, 4, 5 years later and seeing how the things look. Because if they're not doing anything right, if they're not refeeding that soil with manure or things like manure, then they're not going to get near the results they had initially. So that's how you know when someone's doing the right thing, because their garden continuously improves every single year. Now, one of the absolute best fertilizers out there, natural fertilizers that's organic, is going to be manure, and that's why I want to talk about it on this video today. So we're going to keep it to 5 major points. Number 1, what exactly is manure? Number 2, why do I want to add manure to my garden? Number 3, how do the plants actually use it? Number 4, some really good sources of manure and how the plants would use each one of those. And number 5, my preferred source and how I actually integrate it into the garden. So number 1, what exactly is manure? Well, it's poop. It's about the best way I can try to describe it. Manure is poop from livestock. Okay, so number 2, why would you add manure into your garden? Well, the main reason why is because you want to add organic matter to the soil, all right? I don't care where you are in the world. If you have a certain type of soil, there's probably a way that you can probably improve it. And the best way to improve soil is by adding organic matter, because it feeds the soil in ways that chemical fertilizers can't do it, okay? If you just want to go ahead and till up your field and then spray a whole bunch of chemicals on there, you're going to eventually hit a point where you're getting less and less returns, because chemical fertilizers are not adding any organics to the soil. When you add things like manure, you are giving organic matter that's actually going to help that soil retain water, okay? If you live in an area like mine who has a very clay-like soil, then the more organic matter you may add, the easier it's going to be for that soil to contain the water that's actually holding, because clay likes to hold water. It's very slow draining. So if you give it organic matter, then it's going to hold on to that moisture in areas where you're not rotting your roots. Also, in the summertime, the clay turns into like a concrete. So when it comes down to it, middle of July, if I get a heavy, like a hard rain, well, that heavy hard rain is not really going to penetrate. It's going to sit on the surface and it's going to slowly absorb into the dirt. Well, if it's really hot outside, what do you think is going to happen to most of that water? It's probably going to evaporate. It's not really going to make it down to the roots. So if you're adding a whole bunch of organic matter to that soil, then you're only going to give that water a place to go. And that's going to go down to the root system for the plants to use. On the flip side, if you have a very sandy soil, you probably have issues with holding water, because that water, when you put it down onto the plants, it just drains right through. So you might find yourself having to water your garden maybe once a day, sometimes even in the really hot days, twice a day. Well, when you're doing that, all you're doing is you're flushing out nutrients. So if you add things like manure, which adds organic matter to the soil, you're increasing that soil's ability to hold on to moisture. So you're not having to water near as much, and you're holding on to the nutrients you actually have. And another reason why you want to add manure to your soil is because you're basically able to feed the soil what it needs, all right? Whenever you're looking at gardening, I know a lot of people like to think they're feeding the plants, but you don't think about that if you really understand the process. What you need to do is you need to always feed the soil, because if the soil's healthy, then congratulations, whatever you may plant in it is going to survive and succeed extremely well. Because if you don't take care of your soil, the plants or whatever you might be growing in it are not going to be very good. That's where we're going to morph into part number 3. How do plants actually use this stuff? Well, for a long story short, plants need 3 major elements to survive, to succeed. They need N, P, and K: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. No plant can synthesize these. They need to be found in the soil, and if they are not in the soil, the plant will suffer. It most likely will not succeed. It will not grow near as well as it could, and it might actually die before it even gets started. So you have to make sure that if you're putting down putting down anything anywhere, you have a good NPK ratio. Now I go more into detail about the NPK system up here in this video I put here, or I'll put it down in the description for you if you really want to know hardcore about the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium system. But one thing you have to understand is when you add nitrogen, or I'm sorry, when you add manure, you are most likely adding some of those NPKs, all right? Some are better than others. We'll get into that in a little bit, but when you are adding that to the soil, you are giving the plant the much needed nutrition it needs to survive. Also, by adding manure, you're able to give a whole bunch of trace elements that you can't find either. So some animals just have a knack whenever they're eating to eat from a variety of sources, a variety of areas, which means that they're most likely going to get more trace minerals that are going to find its way into its manure, which is going to find its way into the soil when you put it down, which your plants are going to find. And congratulations, now you get those minerals. There's a lot of trace minerals that you need, magnesium, copper, things like that, that you absolutely have to eat. So by putting manure down, you are giving that directly to the plants for you. One more thing I absolutely have to make sure I mention is manures are a very good source of beneficial bacteria. All right, you need beneficial bacteria in your soil, because if you do not have life in the soil, nothing's going to work. So when you see a lot of these factory farms, these industrial farms that do nothing but shoot chemical fertilizers on top, that soil is, for lack of a better word, dead. Yes, they get results, but they have to keep on using more and more chemicals to grow food in that same location, because the soil is stripped of all nutrition and all life. You need to have bacteria in the soil surviving and living, because that bacteria is going to work for you to convert a lot of those chemicals into something the plants can use. Now, what are some examples of manures that we can use in our everyday lives? All right, so number one I'm going to do, the first one is going to be chicken, because that's what I use. My favorite. I like using chicken manure because chicken manure is very high in nitrogen. All right, on the NPK scale, we're looking at about 2 to 1.5 to 1, so it's extremely high in nitrogen for what you're getting. Now, one of the things I want to make sure I mention is chicken manure is high in nitrogen, but it's in the form of ammonia. All right, when you put that into the soil, into the dirt, the plants can't use ammonia straight up. You have to use bacteria to break down the ammonia into a form that the plants can use. That's why I'm talking about you need to have a live soil, living soil, things with microbes in it, because the microbes are only going to help you. So when you use things like chicken manure, which is high in ammonia, you're giving the microbes the ability to change that nitrogen to a form that the plants can use. The thing you have to make sure that you're understanding is chickens are omnivores, okay? A lot of people don't understand that. They think they just eat feed. Well, in reality, if they're not given feed all the time, or if you let them free range, they're eating things like seeds, yes, but they're also eating bugs and potentially even meat. Because yes, I've seen my chickens eat things like moles and mice. I've actually caught them catching mice and lizards and stuff. So they can eat meat as well. So when they do that, because they have that omnivorous diet, there's a good chance that some pathogens might find its way into their manure. So you got to make sure that if you are going to be using their chicken manure, that you compost it first, or at least let it sit for a little while to kind of break down so the pathogens die out. All right, so whenever it comes down to it, you don't want to add chicken manure directly to the soil that you got plants in already, because if you do that, it's going to cause burn the plants. When I say burn it, basically means kill it. Too much of a good thing. It's too hot. So the plants are going to wither up and most likely die. So if you want to use this type of manure, the best way to do it is to compost it first. But one of the really good pluses about using chicken manure is there's a really low probability of seeds surviving through the tract, all right? Because the way chicken's digestive system works compared to other animals is they have a crop, they have a gizzard, and that's basically their digestive tract. The gizzard takes place of most of the stomach actions that you would normally see. So when it comes down to it, they have to pick up pebbles and rocks, which they store in their crop. So if they eat things like weed seeds, that's being ground up continuously by the pebbles in the crop, and also being ground up continuously in the gizzard. So the chance of having weed seeds emerging in the manure is very low. So you can put a whole bunch of chicken manure in a garden bed, let it sit for a couple months, and you're probably not going to have very many weed seeds that pop up. Okay, so what about cows? I know a lot of people like to use cow manure. I know a very good company out there called Black Cow that uses cow manure that you can buy at your local like Lowe's. That's very good stuff. What about that manure? Is it really good? Absolutely, but there's many different reasons why, so I'm just going to kind of break down why people use it. Cows are ruminant animals, okay? They have a ruminant digestive system, meaning they are able to use all the grasses they're able to eat better than other animals that may eat grass, okay? So like corn is a type of grass. Humans can only digest so much of it. Even if we go through like a nixtamalization process, we can only get so much of our nutrition from corn because we simply can't digest it. But ruminant animals like cattle can get the absolute most they can from you know, things like corn and grass. Basically, you know how people say there's like 4 different stomachs in a cow? It's not really 4 stomachs, but it's like 4 chambers of the stomach. Basically, they, long story short, they eat the grass, they chew it, they get the initial digestion process, then they ferment it, let the good bacteria work for them, and they're able to get more nutrition that way, and then they, you know, throw it up, eat the cud, and they're able to extract more nutrition before it's finally expelled from the animal. Long story short, all that really does is it ensures that their manure is almost a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio of NPK. So when it comes down to using it, you're giving your plants a good general fertilizer. So depending on what you may be growing, whether you're growing sunflowers, tomatoes, lettuce, whatever, you're basically getting a good broad spectrum fertilizer for those plants. The only real drawback when it comes to using cattle manure is you have to compost it, because just like chicken manure, it is kind of hot. It will burn the plants in terms of too much of a good thing, so you have to let it compost down, which you're going to want to do anyway, because if you don't compost it, there's probably going to be a whole bunch of weed seeds in there that are going to be germinating in your bed. So if you compost it first, those weed seeds that happen to make it through the whole remnant system, they won't be infecting your raised beds with a whole bunch of weeds that you didn't intend on. Now, what about horses? All right, I know a lot of people out there have horses, or at least grew up around horses, and they know that horses were once a mainstay in almost every single household in America. Well, horses, yes, they may have fallen out of favor, but the one thing that horses do produce a lot of is manure. Horses poop a lot, y'all. Like my mom had horses, and I remember having to sit there and just shovel out crap all the time, so much, in the big giant piles. So you can use that to your advantage if you have horses, or at least you know where a horse farm is. Horses are pooping machines, okay? So they make quite a bit of it. As a matter of fact, they make really good manure on the NPK scale, a little bit more nitrogen than phosphorus, like in terms of a cow, and it's actually like what, 1.5 to 1, so it's really not that bad. It's a pretty good fertilizer, but again, you have to make sure you compost it, because out of all the animals I'm going to talk about, horses are the closest to us in terms of how we produce, or how we kind of extract our nutrition. Horses aren't ruminants like cattle, so they don't sit there and ferment in their gut. They basically eat it, it goes to their stomach, the stomach breaks it down, it goes to their intestines, and it comes out. So if they eat a whole bunch of weed seeds, which horses can get into anything, then most likely their manure is going to be full of seeds. So if you've ever used horse manure and you put it directly into the beds, not only is it going to burn the plants because it's the hot manure, but you're also introducing probably a whole bunch of weed seeds that you don't want, like anything from random wild lettuce, lamb quarter, some good stuff, but also things like dandelions, you name it. There's a whole bunch of seeds that are going to be in there. So if you're going to use horse manure, you are absolutely going to want to make sure that you compost it. All right, and the final animal that I wanted to talk about is going to be rabbits, rabbit manure. Basically because rabbits are pretty easy livestock to have if you are ever in a situation where you need to have like a good source of protein. Having a rabbit hutch would be lucratively easy, and it's a very small scale livestock, so a lot of people can do it. But one of the best reasons for using them is because rabbits eat nothing but grasses, really. So there's nothing in their poop that could potentially hurt you. So it's very low in pathogens, and it is very cold. All right, it is a cold manure, meaning you don't have to compost it first. So if you are going to be able to use that stuff, you can go directly from the rabbit to the garden in the same day. It won't burn the plants, and the plants can use it very quickly. So that is a good part, like a good plus side of using rabbit manure, because it is readily available in nutrition for those plants. All right, so what is my preference when it comes down to it? What kind of manure do I prefer to use in the garden? Well, take a look behind me, look what I have. I have chickens. I don't like spending extra money, so I have to use a resource that I have a lot of that I can get for essentially free, that is going to be very good in the garden. So what is it? Chicken poop. Now, I've been using this stuff for years. This is probably one of the reasons why I have such a big amount of produce that I get, because I constantly refeed my garden with chicken manure. Chicken manure is one of those things, like I said, it's a hot manure, so you can't use it directly on living plants. So right now in January is the best time to put it in your gardens. What you do is you take it, you shovel out your coop, and I like to add like a bedding when I'm in here. So like a pine shavings is what I usually use. And when you use pine shavings, and it adds to their manure, you're able to keep that ammonia and keep the nitrogen from evaporating into the atmosphere. So it combines with the pine shavings and it slowly starts breaking down. So I take that and I put it directly into the garden in January. I'm not planting anything in January, so it's not having any problems with touching my food because there's nothing growing. So I put it in the beds, and what I do is I let it sit there for about 3 months. Since I'm not currently growing anything, and I'm not going to be planting until probably mid-March, that gives me about 2.5 months for all the worms and all the beneficial microbes to break down that manure for me. And when I do plant in there, the food's not going to be ready for another 2 months anyway at the earliest. So that's giving me at least 4.5 months of mellowing out time for that manure. So when I refeed in January, put everything in the beds, I'm giving it plenty of time to break down. As you can see, this is how I do it. I have my garden bed. I threw a whole bunch of compost in here, like compost and vegetables, the stuff that died during the really cold 11-degree morning that we had that basically stayed for 3 days, that basically killed the whole garden. Yeah, I just kind of chopped everything up and I threw it in here. After doing that, I put a whole bunch of chicken manure right here onto the garden. What's going to happen is I'm going to cover this stuff up with straw. When I cover it with straw, before I cover it up, I'm actually going to till it in just a little bit, and I'm going to cover it with straw. Now, over the course of the next 2 months, the worms and the bugs and microbes are going to break this down. So big chunks like this of straight nitrogen are going to be blended in with the dirt and an ability for the plants to use it. So when I finally do plant here in March, boom, I got a whole bunch of nutrition. Now, one thing I want to make sure I mention is this nitrogen source is not a ready deal, okay? It's not like everything's going to be available immediately. Things have to break down, and sometimes it takes well over a year. So this isn't like a nighttime, day and night improvement, all right? I can't just add this stuff to the bed and all of a sudden, boom, my beds are fertile. The amount of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium that I put in here with manure is only about 50% bioavailable in the first year. So that 50% goes to 75% in the next year, and then maybe 85% the following year. So if you keep doing it every single year, you're making sure that your plants always have the nutrition available they need. So that's why I never really run into problems like blossom end rot or stunted growth, because I constantly refeed every single year. It's a really good habit to get into. So if you want to make sure that you're having good quality food, the best possible production you can have, you want to make sure you're adding some form of organic matter in the form of manure, in my personal opinion. Okay, so right here's an example of where I put a lot of my beans last year, my cowpeas, but I also grew a few other things in here like some potatoes at the end of the year. Now, what I did was I put some manure in, but I've already tilled it under. So as you can see, it's a good mixture between soil and manure. Now, the way you're going to make this readily available is you're going to completely cover this up with a straw or some form of mulch. You can use leaves, whatever, because worms aren't going to hit the top layer unless they're protected. So if you use something like a mulch, they're going to be protected and worms are going to come in here easier, and it's going to be easier for this to break down. So within about 3 months of me mulching this is all going to be ready, and it's going to look just like that. A good loamy black soil mixture. Look at that, I already got a worm right there. See? So this is going to be a really good mixture to grow in. Alright, so I think I'm going to wrap the video up there. I think I've basically talked about everything I really wanted to hit on all my main points when it comes down to manure and why you should be adding it to the garden. Hopefully this video helped you in any way get better, get more production out of what you have already. If you have a whole bunch of raised beds, then you understand the struggle of trying to keep that nutrition and fertility up, alright? There's a lot of different factors out there that are harming you, because nitrogen especially is readily evaporating into the atmosphere as we speak. So the more you can hold into your soil, the better. Now, one thing I want to make sure I mention is if you are planting things like perennials, fruit trees, something that takes years before having to be replanted again, then it's going to like a fungal dominated soil, which is why you see a lot of mycorrhizal fungi in the woods, all right, in the forest, because perennials like a fungal association. But if you're planting things like annuals, like vegetables, then you're going to want to have a very bacteria dominated soil. So what's one of the best ways to put bacteria in the soil? manure. So I hope this video helped you in some way understand the point and why you want to make sure that you're using what you have available if you have the opportunity to be around some form of animal. Yes, you can go out to Lowe's right now and buy black cow. It's a very good substitute. It's a good compost to absolutely refill those beds with fertility, and it's a very good option. But if you know a farmer, if you have your own livestock and you could use what you already have in terms of waste in the garden, then it's only going to benefit you in the long run. So hopefully this video helped you. If it did, please do me a humongous favor and give this video a thumbs up. It totally helps me out, and I would very much appreciate it. Subscribe, and I will catch y'all on the next one, all right?